Going to be looking at part 2 of this unjust trial of Christ. Matthew chapter 27, a famous passage. When morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people plotted against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate the governor. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? You see to it. Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. But the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, it is not lawful to put them in the treasury, because they are the price of blood. And they consulted together and brought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then this fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of him who was priced, whom they of the children of Israel priced, and gave them to the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said to him, it is as you say. And while he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. Now at the feast the governor was accustomed to release into the multitude one prisoner, whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ? For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him, saying, have nothing to do with this just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, which of the two do you want me to release to you? They said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, what then shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ? They all said to him, let him be crucified. Then the governor said, why, what evil has he done? But they cried out the more, saying, let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water and washed his hands, and before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. Of this just person, you see to it. And all the people answered and said, his blood be upon us and on our children. Then he released Barabbas to them, and when they had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. May the Lord bless his word to us. We'll just read on to verse 56. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. When they had twisted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! Then they spat on him, and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they took the robe off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to be crucified. Now as he came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they had come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, the place of the skull, they gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink. But when he had tasted it, he would not drink. Then they crucified him and divided his garments, casting lots that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Sitting down, they kept watch over him there, and they put up the inscription over his head, written against him, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then the two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right hand and the other on the left. And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself if you are the Son of God and come down from the cross." Likewise the chief priests also, mocking with the scribes and elders, said, "He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God." Even the robbers who were with him reviled him with the same thing. Now about the 6th hour until the 9th hour there was darkness over all the land. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Some of those who stood there, when they heard it, said, "This man is calling for Elijah." Immediately one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with sour wine and put it on a reed and offered it him to drink. The rest said, "Let him alone. Let us see if Elijah will come to save him." And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked and the rocks were split, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. So when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly this was the Son of God." And many women who followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, were there looking on from afar. Among them was Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. May the Lord bless his reading to us. There's a book I read some time ago, a man called Crewmaker. And on the chapters, when he goes into different chapters, it was all about the suffering Saviour. And he would say things like, "It's hard to look at this." Or, "With a broken heart we turn our gaze." And I'm afraid that's it for this week. Some of the things we look at, if you're a believer, are hard to see. Your Saviour. I was telling Dave earlier on, this week I had a dream about bullies and oppression. And it's all due to this sermon. I've been filling myself with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and the pressure they tried to put him under. When we see clearly the unjustness, we know it had to be that way. Because why? He was the most perfect man that ever lived. He was the God-man. Why? Because people like me can get into heaven. And that's not just. Tesco, a few months ago now, I saw a man who I know from ages ago, and I just said, "Hey, how you doing?" Our lads used to play football together. And I said, "How's church?" He said, "Church?" He said, "I don't go there anymore." I said, "Oh, why not?" He said, "To think them people are getting into heaven." "No, I'm finished." I said, "Hey, I'm getting into heaven. How does that work? How unjust is that?" He couldn't understand it. Imagine, last week at our house, one of the neighbours knocked on the door, our next door neighbour actually. He said, "Graham, will you come and speak to the lad at the end? He's lost his wife. He wants to throw himself under a car. He's going on the moors. He just wants to commit suicide. I've had him in my house for 2 hours, 3 hours. I can't talk to him. He's absolutely... What would it be like if I said, what is that to me? Get on with it. Tell him to get on with it. What would that be like? Or if Oliver and someone in the congregation come to me and says, I've sinned, Oliver, and there's no way out from this sin. Woe is me. I'm done for. What is that to me? Get on with it. Spoken like a true shepherd, looking after the beloved flock. Quick recap from part 1. The scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. We explained about where they'd come from, how the scribes rose up as these lawyers who dealt with the law, translated it from Hebrew to Greek, men of power. The Sadducees believed in the first 4 books, but they only believed in the first 4 books. The Pharisees rose up because they believed in the whole of the Old Testament, and they put laws on top, the oral law. And there was this clash between them. And they were fighting over the high priesthood because it was the place of power. But they hadn't got the power to put to death. The motto of the Sanhedrin was not to destroy life, but to save life. 24 priests, 24 elders, 23 scribes. Remember we talked about the statue of justice with the sword in one hand and the scales in the other. Except there's no scales in these, and those are no blindfold. They're just ready to slay. That's the statue of justice in our story. Annas is the high priest, and as we said last time, he's the head of the mafia. They hate him. Remember Caiaphas' words last week, these are important. John 11:47, then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council together and said, what shall we do, for this man works many signs? They couldn't deny that. If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take us away from both our place, first and foremost, and our nation. Then Caiaphas says, this is it, you know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not the whole nation should perish. So it's just expedient, that's all. It's something that's got to be done as a sacrifice for the nation. And remember, the trial must be in the chamber of hewn stone in the temple. Not at night. It couldn't be something put away in a corner. It had to be public trial with auditors, not mid-afternoon. I've been in Crown Court where they've said, and such, the judge has said, no, we're not listening to that now, we haven't got a proper time. No rushing. See you Monday morning. And everything stops. You think, well, he's just going home for his dinner. No. There's not enough time. He might be going home for his dinner, but no, there's not enough time. And he's trying to be just. So not at night, not mid-afternoon, a public trial with auditors, right to self-defence, no one found guilty except with 2 or 3 witnesses, and never by the mouth of the accused. They couldn't make themselves guilty. And the bias was on the side of the offender, always. So he's taken to Annas and they've failed. He wouldn't answer, remember. And the Sanhedrin was a court of judges, and they would never get involved in charging, really. They're just judges that people bring people to, but here they are charging. And they haven't even got an offence yet, as we said. Jesus said, why are you asking me? I spoke openly in the temple, remember. And one of the officers strikes Jesus in the face, and so it begins. This is the start of it. Annas is done. No answer. Taken across the courtyard to Caiaphas' house, where the Sanhedrin are gathered. He must have had a bigger room. 70 people there. Must have been a big room. But they'd lots of money. These were the big bosses. And he was there from 0200 to 0500. Whilst everybody sleeps in Jerusalem. Remember, today is the Passover, a feast day, and it's a problem. They must get an offence before daybreak. They must ratify it in some way at the chamber of hewn stone. And then they must take it first light to Pilate. And when they crucify him, he must be off the cross before nightfall. See what a problem they've got. And another problem is what they take to Pilate. He's got to agree, yes, put him to death. Annas and the staff come in and go, couldn't get anything. And Jesus stands bound. Well, the Sanhedrin's not been wasting any times. The clock's ticking. They've already been at work, the Bible says. What were they doing? They've all witnesses lined up ready. Listen to this, Matthew 26:59. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death. No. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death. Sought false testimony. Now how does that stand up? Now the Sadducees only believed in the first 4 books. In Deuteronomy it says, if a false witness is rise against another to testify against him of his wrongdoings, both men in the controversy will stand before the Lord and before the priests and the judges in those days. And the judges will make careful inquiry, and indeed, if the witness is a false witness, and he has testified falsely against his brother, you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So that way you'll put away evil from among you. They're seeking false witnesses. I just wonder if they cautioned the witnesses, like we said last week, before they spoke. If you cause the condemnation of a personally unjustly accused, his blood and the blood of all the posterity of him who you have deprived the earth will fall on you. And God will demand of you an account as he demanded of Cain, re the blood of Abel. Now speak. It was a complete failure. The false witnesses was a complete failure. Mark's gospel tells us. Not even then did the testimony agree. And it was not a capital offence. Never sell this to the Romans. What they'd come up with. They had a problem. So Caiaphas gets up in a rage. He's been sat down at this time. Answerest nothing to this, he says to Jesus. That you said you'd destroy the temple and build it up in 3 days. You're answering nothing to these accusations. What accusations? They even knew themselves. They got nothing. Jesus kept silent. Just as Scripture said, as a lamb before its shearers is done. And this was Caiaphas' last stand now. I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you're the Son of God. Asking him to say something that's going to condemn him. But they weren't bothered about that. It is as you have said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Matthew 26:64. You know, I kept thinking, when they were doing all these things, were they not the least bit afraid that Jesus were going to, when they said, are you the Son of God, that he might say, I am, like he did in the garden? When John MacArthur says he thinks there's over 1,000 people go to get him in the garden. And Jesus says, I am he. And they all fall on the floor. Were they not just that little bit afraid? I adjure you, are you he? For him saying, I am he, and they're all going to fall off the seats. They didn't recognise the words that he spoke to them from Psalm 110 and Daniel 7. They were too busy celebrating. Yes, the coup de grace. Then the high priest rose, tore his clothes, and saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? What do you think? And they said, he is deserving of death. No. He's deserving of an open trial. Remember the post office story? Post office, these people, some went to prison, some committed suicide, and it was unjust for one reason. They knew that them accounts of the postmasters could be remotely accessed from head office. Now that totally undermines the case. Totally. Oh, if something here. If he says he's the Messiah, what's going to undermine this case of prosecuting that he's the Messiah? Is the Messiah prophesied to come? Yes. Oh, so there is a Messiah coming? Yes. They're not even going to look there. That undermines totally the case. The scribes had written these texts out and everybody agreed the Messiah would come. So no auditors, no counting of votes, no defence. A hypocritical celebration would have been cut short if the first witness came in and said, I'm the cupbearer of Herod. And in the 35th year of his reign, I saw them wise men coming to Jerusalem. They pointed to the star. They pointed it out to me. Numbers 24:17. He was born in Bethlehem. Micah 5 verse 2. We didn't know that. He came out of Egypt. Hosea 11 verse 1. Miraculous ministry. Just like it said. And you said, he does many works and signs. They couldn't disagree. And jumping ahead a little now, he will come riding on a donkey. Ooh, that should have rung some bells. Zechariah 9:9. And he will be sold for 30 pieces of silver, as we read in our passage. Wow, that should have got some real alarm bells ringing. No. They weren't interested. Remember, this is just expedient. That's all. It's expedient that one die. That's all it is. They've nothing against him supposed to. It's just expedient. You know, it's just going to have to be the case. I remember being with Rob down in Strongstride where we used to live. And there was a lad there and I was telling him about something. I said, hey, don't do that. And he just went, and he spat right in my face. Oh, I wanted to wring his neck. I was absolutely furious. I don't know if you've ever had that done. Spit in your face. It was horrible. There was a lady at Farnworth police station. She was dying of AIDS. Well, she was in Farnworth. And everybody hated the call to the hospital because this lady was there. And they couldn't get her out to the hospital. And if you went to anywhere near her, it was when AIDS first came about, she'd spit on you. Now, you know, everyone was very ignorant about what this was going to do. But nobody wanted to go near her. Spitting at people. Matthew 26:67. These shepherds turn into hyenas now. This is the judges of Israel. Then they spat in his face and beat him. Others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy unto us, Christ. Who is the one that struck you? Remember, this is just expedient. They're behaving like a pack of hyenas. Luke 22 says, many other things they blasphemously spoke to him. Then they left him with the temple police, while the Sanhedrin had 2 hours to retire till 5. Down to the chamber of hewn stone, a quick show of hands. It was a show trial. It was a mockery. Then they had a mile walk of victory with Jesus. It was a mile from where the temple was to Herod, to Pilate. And Jesus was bound, swollen, dishevelled, and they walked him through. And the crowds are stirring on the feast day, and they see this victory procession. What is going on here? They should have remained in the court in case anybody came and said anything. waiting if any witnesses came with a defence, and then the council could deliberate. Not a chance of it. Matthew 26, early in the morning, they plotted against Jesus to put him to death. What do you mean they plotted? They've got everything they need. What were they plotting? And when they had bound him, they led him away to be delivered to Pilate. They all went with him as a display of this total being together. The whole of the Sanhedrin. They arrive at Pilate's door, but they won't go in because it's a feast day. And if we go in, we're going to defile ourselves and we can't take the feast. After what they've just done, maybe sometimes they sent to Pilate the case notes with a scribe and a witness. Pilate, this is the one who's committed this offence. Matthew 15:10, he knew that they'd delivered him by envy. Pilate wasn't daft. Now, I said, what were they plotting? This is what they were plotting. All they had, that he'd knocked the temple, or that he was the Son of God, that's not going to stand in Rome. They had to think about things. What offence they could give to Caesar. This is what they were plotting. And Luke 23 verse 2, we found this fellow perverting the nation, forbidding taxes. Forbidding taxes to Caesar. Where did that come from? Saying he himself is a king. How the charges have changed. There's two things that Pilate must investigate. King, not paying taxes to Rome. The real story was, and listen to the real story of this, of how they wiggled it round as in forbidding taxes to Caesar. The Pharisees come to Jesus, teacher, we know that you are true. Lies. And care about no one, for you do not regard the personage of men, but teach the way of God in truth. They did not believe that. Soft soaping him. Oh, we know you're this man. Then it comes in. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Got him. Got him. What's he going to say to this? Bring me a coin. Whose image and inscription is this? Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And it said, they marvelled at him. But now, they're accusing him of saying that nobody should pay taxes to Caesar. By now, we're not surprised. We know now he goes from Pilate to Herod and then back to Pilate again. And Pilate tells us, neither me nor Herod find any fault. He's innocent. I've tried him. Herod's tried him. He's back here. Tried him here. He's innocent. And Pilate has him scourged and put a crown of thorns on him, his beard plucked out, and brings him out and says, behold the man, surely this is enough. Listen to the responses. Therefore, when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, crucify him, crucify him. We have no king but Caesar. They were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And the voices of these men and of the chief priests prevailed. When Herod found no fault, they were there and vehemently accused him. And now there's a telling phrase comes here. I don't know if you watched a football match and they're 2-1 down and they're trying to get back to 2-2 and they get a corner and the player will go, come on, come on, come on, get behind us, and he's stirring the crowd up. And here we have the verse here, but the chief priest stirred up the crowd. Stirred up the crowd. These just judges. Enter stage left, Judas. Previous sightings of Judas have been, pull up a chair. We couldn't have done it without you. Literally. Mount of Olives is dark. There's no lights. We'd never have found him. Could have been anywhere. But you, give us the key. How are you doing? That had been the previous meetings with the Pharisees and Sadducees. Matthew 27, then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he'd been condemned and was remorseful, and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. There's another one saying he's innocent. He's a sinner, Jesus is innocent. Just reading this, when I spoke to that lad at the end of our road, you could feel the desperation. You can feel the desperation here in this man. What is that to us? See to it. Matthew Henry says, more like the priests of the devil than of God. They've used him, now they throw him under his own buzz. And they've used temple money given by people like the widows who put the mites in to fund all this. Terrible. Innocent? What is that to us? Oh, blood money. What are we going to do with the blood money? We can't put it back in the treasury. What are we going to do with it? Bothering about things like that after what they're doing. No wonder Pilate saw straight through them. See to it. What shepherds, what protectors. Isaiah 10 verse 1, woe to those who decree unrighteous degrees, who write misfortune they have prescribed. Pilate sends him to be crucified with the title, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. No, 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 no. They say, don't say King of the Jews, say that he said he was the King of the Jews, not that he is the King of the Jews. What I have written, I have written. And they all follow to the cross. Firstly, to discredit that sign. You would think if it was just expedient for one to die for the nation, that they might be being a bit withdrawn here, and well, it's just what we've got to do. No, 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 no. What is that to us? And now they stick the knife in. Does the ear on the grass in the Garden of Eden not speak to, in the Garden of Gethsemane not speak to them? It doesn't say that Jesus picked it up and put it back. It says that Jesus just touched him and created an ear. Maybe it was still in the grass. Did it not speak to them? The sole object now is to deride, discredit, and vindicate themselves. And Jesus looks like this pathetic figure on the cross, unrecognizable as a man, we're told, Scripture tells us. Listen to the impartial judges and the shepherds. They sneered at him, Isaiah says, shooting out their lips. He saved others, which they couldn't deny. Let him save himself. If he is the Christ, the chosen of God, stirring up again, as they did in front of Pilate. If he is the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now, if he will have him. And do you not think it's a coincidence that the same charge that was brought, the false charge of him destroying the temple and building it in 3 days, that was brought before the Sanhedrin, is now mentioned so easily at the cross? The same charge. You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross. It's unbelievable, that, isn't it? Said in this courtroom, and all of a sudden now everybody around the cross is saying it. What wicked men. We've had enough. And we better leave the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the scribes, because they've got some sorting out to do. First of all, they have to go to the temple, because the temple's in chaos. The temple curtain from the Holy of Holies is split in two. I wonder if some of the priests had stopped working, because if they could see through into the temple of the Holy of Holies, there was death. They wanted to go nowhere near it. and the darkness, the mass darkness. So they've got some sorting out to do. And they're going to have to dig into that church treasury again to bribe the guards at the tomb. The ones they told to tell everybody that they'd fallen asleep, and that's how Jesus was taken. The disciples come and took him. So do we go home now saying, wow, they were a bad lot? Yes, that's a sinner. Utter wickedness, them people. Why did he die? How could he die? Where could they take him to, really? He told them, as he told the disciples, he got 12 legions of angels to help if he wanted to. The Bible is quite clear. I gave my back to the smiters and my cheeks to them that plucked out the hair. As he sweat blood in the garden, contemplating what was to come, and at the cross, what do we see there? Something the world says isn't true. God's immutability. If there was ever a time that God would want to change, or if they were looking for an answer, Father, if there be any other way, Martin Lloyd-Jones says, what immutability stands in front of us? No change in God. People say, talking about that friend I speak to at the corner, he says, in today's society, and we look at this, we're going to have to go back and change a few things because society has moved on from where the Old Testament was, talking about homosexuality and these other things. We're going to have to change. If ever there was a place that change could have happened, it was there at such a precious time. Never. Because God is unchangeable. And his heart is open and exposed. They couldn't take him anyway. It was him for me. Him for me. He was ridiculed. He was humiliated, so I don't need to be. He bore sin's penalty because I could never take it. And as we said last week, there's no justice here in this world. But here is where we see real justice. When I thought about that, real justice. Oliver keeps talking, you'll never see real justice in this world. But we saw it there at the cross. Real justice. The one who knew no sin being made to be sin for us. That is why I think we're given that picture of him being as unrecognisable as a man. Of what it did to him. Why? So that he had the omnipotent power to save and to keep. All glory be to God. Was it hard? Isaiah 42 verse 6 says this. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness and will hold your hand. I will keep you. Matthew Henry says, he, God, promises to stand by him, that's Christ, and strengthen him in it, to hold his hand. Not only to his work, but in it, to hold his hand that he might not shake, and that it might not fail, and so to keep him. When an angel was sent from heaven to strengthen him in his agonies, the Father himself was with him. Then his promise was fulfilled. Note, he says, those whom God calls, he will own and help, and he will hold their hands. Wow, I was blown away when I read that. It was Oliver this morning. So, what is it to you? What does it mean? I remember speaking to a lad at our work. I'd had a few witnesses to him. He was at my station. There was only 3 of us at the station. And he used to see me reading my Bible and preparing things. And he used to say, he said, I'm a Christian, Graham. He said, I've been confirmed and, He said, aren't I? He said, So, well, I said, here's a test for you, Dave. He said, read John chapter 19. I said, if that doesn't do something here, you're not a believer. You're not a believer. Whether you've been confirmed or whatever it is, if you don't read these things and it doesn't hit home and it doesn't hurt, like Crewmaker says, can we look at these things? Because for the believer it was for me. We sang it. All ye that pass by, to Jesus draw nigh. To you is it nothing that Jesus should die? The senior leadership team of Israel, as we called them, think before you condemn them. We now on this side of the cross know clearly why he died. And that if it's nothing to us, the more condemnation falls on us. We know exactly what has happened. Is it nothing to you that the most innocent man who ever lived was condemned to die? And he was the Son of God. And it was for you. May the Lord help us. Let's sing our closing hymn.